Venezuela, 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 country collapse. Hello, everybody. We're talking about the fall of the great socialist tyrant Madero. It appears things are not going well for him in the country of Venezuela. So, I haven't had a ton of time, just been very busy with work to get caught up on all of this. But basically, what's been happening is the opposition has sworn in a new man as president, and a lot of the world is recognizing him. Let me just bring this up. Sorry, I'm not completely prepared. It's kind of took me a bit off guard. Okay, so let me just bring this up, and then we'll go into some of the background. So as you guys know, stuff has been going really poorly in Venezuela for the last couple of years. Basically, since Chavez came to power, they've been continually re-electing his party using fraudulent elections. And I mean, these are like the most obviously fraudulent elections ever. I'm going to show you one of these is like the biggest, just like fuck you in the history of fake elections. Let's see here. Okay, so let's just go over. Let's start breaking this whole thing down. Yes, buy my book. That is helpful. So let's go back a couple of years. So Chavez was in power since how far back was Chavez in power? Like the 90s? God, he's been in power a long time. So basically, he kept rigging elections. I'm sure he had a bit of support at first because he came to power on a platform of like removing the gringo and making Venezuela economy great again. So what was his initial political party? Fifth Republic. Okay, it's still the same party, Fifth Republic movement. So Hugo Chavez's government was kind of like a combination of socialism, jingoism, fake Christian democracy, and mostly a kleptocracy. It theoretically, Venezuela is a wealthy country. It has some of the largest oil reserves in the world. Let me just bring that up over here. But the country's terminal incompetence combined with the severe corruption. Okay, no, yes. At the moment, Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world by a fairly substantial margin. Saudi Arabia is the only other country that comes vaguely close. So, yeah, it was good to be on Beckloff's stream again. If you haven't looked at Beckloff's channel lately, there's a lot of like drama going on, so you might want to watch like his latest two videos. But we're not here to talk about him. So yeah, so Venezuela has tons and tons of oil, but more or less what happened with that was, the price of oil has crashed in the last couple of years. Let me just bring that up. Let's see here. Price of oil over time. Yeah, so the price of oil has completely and utterly crashed. The other thing here, we'll bring this up. So it used to be over $100 a barrel, but in the last decade, it's now down to less than $50 a barrel. And keep in mind that's an even bigger decline than you might think because that doesn't account for inflation. Oh no, this is inflation adjusted. Never mind. So the last 10 years, yeah, it's gone from 100 to less than half of the value that was previously at. The other thing is Venezuela took out massive loans from China in exchange for selling the oil to China at below cost. So Venezuela literally has no means of making money, and the country is run by a bunch of incompetent kleptocrats. So they can't extract the oil anyway. So Venezuela's oil production has been declining. It's been making less money, and what oil they do make goes to China. So they're kind of completely screwed. Who the hell is Prove? Anyways. So yeah, so Hugo Chavez rigged a bunch of elections. The first time I think he was really close to being defeated was the Venezuelan election of 2012, which we're all pretty sure that he lost, but in typical Hugo Chavez fashion, he rigged that one. This one was especially close, the 2013 presidential election, um, in which somehow Madero lost by like 0.5% of the vote, which is not suspicious at all. Um, Calling it a joke. It would take years. So, yeah, so Madero just continued to go along. And we recently had another presidential election. So somehow, despite the economy collapsing, the opposition over the last three elections has gone from 44% to 49% to 20%. And you got to ask yourself, how the hell did that happen? If the situation is getting worse, shouldn't the opposition's share of the vote be going up? No, he rigged it. Okay, so clept or clepping something means uh, kleptocrat. Klepto means stealing. So a kleptocrat is someone who steals, and a kleptocracy is a government that's entirely based on just robbing the people. It's, I guess, the best way to put it. Probably the greatest kleptocrat in modern history would be Suharto. So yeah, so they keep going down in the number of people who support it. So the other side, of course, in most countries is the parliament. You have the president and you have the parliament. And so they used to rig elections more, but the last couple have been semi-open. Like in 2010, the opposition managed to win basically the same number of votes. And in the last election, the opposition actually won by a fairly substantial margin. Now you got to wonder, this is after vote rigging. So who knows like what it actually is, like how many votes they actually got if they still lost after massively rigging it. So what happened in this election is, because the government lost power, they set up a completely new branch of government. They set up something called the Constituent Assembly, which took all the power away from the National Assembly, from the Parliament, and gave it to this completely new body that they just kind of pulled out of their asses. And it's won 100% by. It's 100% controlled by the governing party. Let's see here. I'm just trying to find it. Um, okay, yes. So this assembly, so they took over all of the powers of the assembly, where the opposition had won power, and it's basically ceased to exist. It's still there, but it has no power anymore. They just created an entirely new branch of government to deal with it. So this election was pretty funny. So let's see here. Um, the government claimed 99% of the public voted, because that's obviously what happened. Let's see here. Let me just try to find it. It was okay. So like opinion polls showed that 80%, like up to 90% of the population didn't agree with this and thought it was a bad idea. So they revised it. It was originally 90% voted, and then only 8% vote. Then only 40% voted. Let's see here. Where is the thing? Okay, so of the how many of the like 8.5 million votes, 3.7 million of those were cast in the last 30 minutes before the polls closed. Does that sound legitimate to you? Does that sound like that was a real election? Like they don't even care anymore. They just invented another branch of the government and then had a fake election to stack it with their political partisans. So that's kind of the state of affairs. So in the aftermath of this is kind of how the world came up. So obviously the anti-Western bloc of Russia, Iran, Syria, and China said this is a great idea. We wholeheartedly support this, as well as the socialist countries in the Western Hemisphere, Bolivia, obviously, Ecuador, Cuba, and Nicaragua, whereas the remainder of the world was against it. Um, and said this is obviously a fake election, etc. Now, people probably wondering, like Arjun, you've been very critical of democracy in the past, so why are you complaining about fake elections? Because if you're gonna like have your rule legitimized by election by elections, then you have to, I think, kind of keep to the results of the elections. If they were just saying, "Oh, we're a socialist government, we rule by the at the behest of the people, elections don't matter," then that would kind of be fine. I mean, it wouldn't be fine because it's a fucking shit show, but that would at least be more acceptable to me. That would be at least more logically consistent. But the government of Venezuela has not said that. They've said that they rule through legitimate elections. So yeah, so it's interesting whenever these fake elections happen because whether or not an election is legitimate largely has to do with which countries, who the allies are. So obviously the Western countries are more allied with the pro-democracy faction. It's funny because the opposition in Venezuela isn't even like right wing. It's like center left. The leader of the opposition defined themselves as a Lulista, as like kind of a third way advocate. Um, so it's not even like a left wing opposition. They just want like mild socialism, as opposed to just complete disaster what they have at the moment. So that's kind of the lead up. We've had just total economic devastation. If you've seen any of my Venezuela economy poor videos, Venezuela's rapidly become one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, maybe only behind Haiti at this point, and probably worse than Haiti in some ways, just in the sense that it fell. I mean, Haiti's been is a shithole. It's always been a shithole. Venezuela wasn't nearly as shitty prior to this happening. Let's go. I want to look at what portion of Venezuela's economy is petroleum. I'm just kind of curious. GDP price sector. Where is oil? Wow. 87% of the population lives in poverty. Let's see here. Oh, okay. So one of the things that happened was they fired all the employees of their oil corporation when Hugo Chavez took power and replaced it with incompetent um, people. Oh, 98%? Okay, yes. 98% of Venezuelan exports is oil. So, yeah, that's where it is. I mean, that is a good state for your economy to be in. Let's see who they sell the oil to. Oh, they actually do sell it to the United States. Interesting. Interesting, interesting. China, of course. India, Switzerland. Switzerland, that's really random. Brazil, I thought Brazil had its own oil. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so let's get into the Venezuelan presidential crisis. Oh no, that's the presidential election. Where is the crisis? Sorry, I'm not super prepared for this. A lot of this stuff just kind of came up in the last couple days, and I've been very busy at work. Okay, I don't think that's it. Oh, here we go. Venezuelan presidential crisis. Okay, so basically the opposition got together and they declared this guy, some random dude, to be the new president. They just declared him. So the actual parliament, the National Assembly, which was elected in a relatively open election, declared him president, whereas um, okay, so the election was not. Okay, so let me just go back. Okay, so the 2018 election was not considered legitimate and it was very obviously rigged. So the National Assembly, which was mostly popularly elected, picked the opposition candidate as being the new president, whereas the Constituent Assembly, which is the fake thing that they set up, is the fake thing that they set up picked Madero to be the president. They wanted the great socialist tyrant to stay in power. So we have this situation in which most of the world recognizes the opposition president, and this is in a really bad state. So once again, falls along similar lines. Most countries that are not run by socialist governments recognize the opposition. Europe has taken an interesting position on this. They've just announced that they recognize the authority of the National Assembly to declare the president without explicitly recognizing the president. And Madero's allies have continued to support him. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the military with regards to this. Whether the military is going to continue to be. So he claims it was a gringo puppet government, and they blocked Wikipedia. So a recent poll has over 80% of the population support him being removed from power. And I mean, the country's a shithole. The country is a complete and utter disaster. I occasionally have people defend Venezuela under these videos and say, well, it's better than them being a puppet state of the U.S. No, it isn't. If Venezuela became a colony of the U.S., that would probably be less bad than the situation. Okay, so Quarty says the military has already decided to back Madero. Probably because Madero gives them. Let's see here. Oh, it doesn't say military. Probably because Madero gives them toilet paper and stuff. Also, what tends to happen in some of these regimes is the military has kind of a sunk cost thing. That is, the military realizes that if they were to pull back and allow a successor government to come to power, people would start asking embarrassing questions like, didn't you execute all those civilian protesters? And didn't you steal all that shit from me? And the military doesn't want that to happen for obvious reasons. So they tend to circle the wagons often around whoever the tyrant of the week is. So I'm not necessarily against a one-party state or even kind of some sort of dictatorship, but the country was so appallingly poorly run that they had to get rid of him. He's lost all legitimacy at this point. I mean, you've seen how bad it is. It is horrible. Oh, the Catholic Church actually did something decent for once. Okay, they declared it. They declared the current government illegitimate. So that's kind of the current situation. I don't know, does anyone have anything else they want me to look up? Because that's kind of all I have at the moment. Uh, oh, somebody sent me a video they told me to watch. Okay, so let's watch this video together. Oh, it's like an hour long? Oh, I don't have time to watch it if it's an hour long. So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't think this is going to be a serious situation because the opposition just doesn't have a big enough army. So I don't know what the result will be. I guess there's a couple possibilities. Madero could just crush the opposition and just take an open place as an autocrat, just declare a state of emergency and cancel all future elections. That's a possibility. There could be a military intervention by Colombia, Brazil, and maybe the US. Or there could be like sanctions to try to force Venezuela to comply. I mean, we don't really know yet. The whole thing's going very is still in the very early phases. And yeah, stuff has not been going well at all. Venezuela continues to have one of the highest inflation rates on earth. A large portion of the population is starving, etc. Yeah, so here we go. So oil revenue has been collapsing because of incompetence, whereas inflation's been going massively up. That's just kind of how things have been going. Actually, it's interesting. It wasn't that high under Chavez. No, it was high under Chavez. It was only like 30%. Let's see. Quarty says they need to kill Madero and petition a blue helmet army contingent by the UN to call for elections later. I don't know about that, but they have to get rid of Madero and replace it with some sort of transitional government. It's a mess at the moment. It's a complete and total mess. It is a disaster zone. So the other thing we have to keep in mind is this could trigger a refugee crisis. And Latin America is already in the middle of a refugee crisis. You know what? I did a video on this. So we're going to do something really meta. We're going to watch a video I haven't released yet about this. Because when else am I going to release this now that this whole thing has happened in Venezuela? The refugee crisis. Come on. Where are you? No. Maybe I didn't name the video yet. Okay. Just trying to remember when I recorded this. Don't worry, I'm a professional. I'm a professional streamer. No, that's China economy strong. That's not Venezuela economy poor. Where the hell did I put this video? Oh, well. Just give me a minute. Okay, here we go. Okay, I found it. So in ultra meta fashion, we're gonna watch this together. So this is what's happening, and this is what could get worse. Oh, thank you, Cornhorn. That's gonna go straight to the Bills. Oh, oops. This is serious. Contrary to what you might think, this is not going to be an episode of Venezuela economy poor. Because frankly, this is serious. This isn't me making fun of like a third world country. This is really, really scary. And this could be one of the most devastating things in the last decade. Who knows? This could potentially be as bad as the refugee crisis in Europe. If Hillary Clinton was in power, this would be as bad as the refugee crisis in Europe. So basically what's happened, if you've seen any of my Venezuela economy poor videos, Venezuela just continues to spiral downward. There's a lot of reasons for this. The low price of oil. They borrowed huge amounts of money from China in exchange for selling China at oil below cost. So they actually lose money on the oil they export. And losing money on oil production is quite an accomplishment.
It's hard.
Not a lot of people can make that claim to fame.
Yep.
But apparently they can. They're somehow losing money on the production of oil. You also have a command economy, not like a social market economy or a socialist market economy or socialism with Chinese characteristics, but Venezuela has a completely centrally planned economy run by kleptocrats who can't do anything properly. So it is become. I did another video. I think it's the average weight loss in Venezuela is like 12 to 18 pounds, and that includes women and children, because of how bad the famine's got in there. There's no toilet paper. There's no basic medicine. The country is collapsing very rapidly. And what happens when countries collapse? Refugees flee the country and bring their problems to other countries. So this has changed a bit since this article was published. But for quite a bit of time, the various countries of Latin America had an open border policy for Venezuelan refugees. And that's really scary because we're looking at millions, maybe like 10 million. That's enough to significantly change the demographic and political makeup of the other countries in the region. My fear, of course, is they're going to start heading en masse to the United States and Canada. Imagine if 10 million Venezuelans just showed up in the southern states. And given how we function, they'll probably get registered as voters because there's no voter ID laws. They'll probably start voting Democrat. And as bad as things are now, if they reach the U.S., it's going to be like 1,000 times worse.
It really would be that much worse.
Thank God we have Trump in power. Okay, let's see. President Trump's hostility to migrants has robbed the U.S. Okay, what's this? Has robbed the U.S. government of the ability to lead the response to Venezuela's migrant crisis. Although the Trump administration has set aside nearly $56 million to support the displaced Venezuelans, that's like nothing, including $6 million announced last month. The $6 million won't even like cover the cost of sending them the $6 million. Regional governments say the U.S. lacks the moral authority to lecture about protecting migrants, as the Miami Herald has reported. Let's see here. Over the last 4 years, about 2 million Venezuelans have fled their chaotic homeland. Let me just look up what the population of Colombia is, because I think most of them are going there.
Actually, they're going to Ecuador, I think. I think Colombia.
Okay, Colombia's population is 50 million, so that could be like 2% of their population, which is not insignificant. Even as the United States separates migrant children from their parents, which is base, commissions prototypes of let's see here. Latin America has adopted a distinctly productive approach to its own migration challenges. I love how that's like letting in millions of presumably uneducated, poor people with no ties to your country and giving them free stuff. Nothing bad could ever come out of that.
Nothing bad.
Like, it's productive. They're always a benefit to the country. There always are. Let's see here. This year, apprehensions at the U.S. border averaged 33,000 per month, according to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection data. By contrast, 40,000 Venezuelans arrive in Colombia every month. Tiny Ecuador has absorbed 630,000 Venezuelans over the last 2 years. So they're now like 5% of its population. So 5% of the population is from a foreign country and a foreign culture with no ties to Ecuador. Like if another million people go there, that'll be 10% of the population. And given the lack of rule of law in these countries, those people are going to vote. And you think they're not going to vote for more Venezuelan refugees? Yes, they will. The commitment to open borders has been remarkable in its retardation, not least because Latin American governments have not always rolled out the red carpet for the hemisphere's huddled masses. The Dominican Republic's treatment of Haitian migrants, for example, is notorious, including...
That was base that they kicked them out. Fuck the Haitians.
...sporadic efforts to revoke citizenship. Well, who wants Haitians in your country?
Exactly.
My understanding is part of the reason why America has intervened militarily in Haiti was to prevent the migrants from coming. Haitians are like some of the worst just on earth. The only time that like a country sent their best was when Fidel Castro expelled all the political dissidents who tended to be the best Cubans. We'll just leave it at that. Moreover, Mexico is frequently criticized for failing to protect Central American migrants. The region's generosity towards fleeing Venezuelans hasn't been consistent. Chile, our favorite destination for Haitians and Venezuelans. I wonder why, because Chile is fairly well run and wealthy, as did Colombia. Isn't Colombia supposed to be ruled by a far right government? They kind of suck between that and the legalization of gay marriage. I don't know. In the Caribbean, the islands off Venezuela's coast have increased scrutiny of Venezuelan travelers, and Brazil's remote Amazonian state of Roraima, the governor complained that she was looking after the needs of Venezuelans to the detriment of Brazilians. Fuck you, governor. It's your job isn't to care for your own people, it's to care for randoids from Venezuela who are probably criminals. Brazilian rioters recently destroyed a migrant camp, sending Venezuelans fleeing back across their border, confirming the UN Human Rights Council's warnings that incidents of discrimination, xenophobia against Venezuelans will increase as migration.
Yep, not wanting millions of illegal immigrants to your country is, once again, xenophobia.
Continues to rise. So, not wanting to allow an unlimited number of people to come into your country is the xenophobia. It's funny this idea that countries have no right to enforce their borders, none whatsoever. Nevertheless, let's see here. Rio La Plata region. In Argentina and Uruguay, the governments have opened these Venezuelan migrants with open arms. Well, obviously they have because they're the whitest countries in Latin America. I mean, outside of, I guess, maybe like, I don't know if Costa Rica is, but Uruguay is the whitest country in Latin America. It's mainly run by Germans and it has
I think Uruguay is the whitest country. That's also why it's the most paused.
the highest rate of atheism. So it's just full of like virtue signaling, white liberals. Same thing with Venezuela by and large. Let's see here. Over half of Venezuelan migrants in Argentina hold a college degree, and more than 1 in 10 are engineers. Okay, so maybe they are sending their best. Let's see here. Many.
I don't believe for a second that's the case. That sounds like something somebody made up. Then again, maybe it could be because they're leaving because they're smart enough to get out and they know they can find work somewhere else.
Argentines and Uruguayans feel indebted to Venezuela, who accepted thousands of asylum seekers in the 1970s. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Argentina's has been a president is a criticism of it. Okay, so anyways. So yeah, they've just been accepting massive numbers.
No, Brazil is a Portuguese country. I know it's kind of random because Brazil's like half of South America. But no, Brazil is. Okay, what had happened with the Treaty of Tordesillas is the world was divided in two with part of it going to Portugal and the other half going to Spain. And Brazil happened to be in Portugal's half. So they colonized it.
Of them, uh, etc. So let's just continue on to an article from Breitbart. Let's see here. 10 million Venezuelans could flee country within the next 4 years. I don't know how many it is for the refugee crisis, but that sounds comparable. Like I said, that could completely and permanently alter the demographic makeup of the surrounding countries. I don't know. Let's see. The another institute has made a similar estimate of 8.2 million Venezuelan refugees during the same time frame in a study released this week. Wow, 10 million Venezuelans. Okay, Uruguayans have urged the international community to take in more because they have to. Removing Maduro from power isn't the solution to this. Letting him continue to destroy the country is. Let's see, including projected oil projections, the price of oil, okay, it inflows of other sources of foreign resources such as remittance. Malnutrition is undoubtedly the most important factor in the migration crisis. How an oil-rich country can't afford food when food is extremely cheap. Could they just import, like, oil tankers full of rice or something? I mean, that would at least give them enough calories. The fact that they can't even feed their people, I think, says something, despite them having huge oil reserves.
It doesn't make any sense.
Let's see. Other basic living resources such as medicine, electricity, and sanitary products. If you look it up, there is video of they have the massive commie blocks, and people have started lighting fires within their commie blocks because there's no electricity or gas anymore. Around 80% of Venezuelans are now short on food. 80% of them are suffering malnutrition. That's like North Korea. I actually don't know if that's higher than North Korea.
It could be. I'm not
The
sure.
collapse of the country's healthcare system leading to a dramatic rise in every major health condition from malaria to tuberculosis. Maybe obesity? Who knows? Because what's probably happening is they're probably just chugging like cooking oil and stuff if they don't have anything else. Let's see. We estimate that the people who's okay, so yeah, they're leaving en masse. So let's see here. Let me just find this what I said. Okay, so if the government of Venezuela were to put all of its net income from oil, all the foreign aid receives, and all of the remittances from foreign workers, they would not be able to raise enough money to pay the basic caloric needs of the country. That's not including like cleaning the streets, I think clean water, electricity, rule of law, like police forces. The government is physically incapable of providing food to its people. This is how fucked it is. People are saying like another 5 million could leave, and they could all be coming to America. And it doesn't look like the price of oil is going to go up anytime soon. It doesn't really matter because they've already sold it at a reduced price to China in advance. So this is going to be catastrophic. God knows, like, and if the regime does collapse, it's going to get even worse. Maybe. I don't know. I think at this point they're going to have to just the U.S., Colombia, and Bolsonaro should team up and invade Venezuela, and just send massive humanitarian aid and try to get the country on its feet, because it's become a existential threat to the rest of the Americas. Just the refugees, but also a collapse in the health system is very dangerous, because a lot of diseases like smallpox, etc., have been eliminated. They don't exist anymore in the modern world. And if they start coming back, then they'll mutate. And if they mutate, then the current medications or the current what's it called again? Vaccines might not be effective against them, which is why there's mandatory vaccines. Because if a couple people start getting smallpox again, it'll mutate, and then everyone can be infected by it, and that would be horrible. So because Venezuela doesn't have a functional health system and they're living in a cesspool without even basic sanitation, who knows what kind of diseases are getting cooked in there? Who knows how they're going to grow and mutate? Maybe some new stuff is going to come out of there. The environmental disaster, I'm sure they're dumping tons of garbage into the rivers and the Gulf of Mexico. It is a mess, and they're going to have to do something about it. I don't know. Invading it would be a fucking mess too, but I don't know if that would be less of a mess than letting this situation just continue as is. Maybe just giving Venezuela a ton of foreign aid so that they can at least feed their people would be the least bad solution to this issue. But like I said, this is catastrophic. This is cataclysmic. This is going to be one of the biggest challenges in the next decade. Anyways, I hope you learned something from the video, and I'll talk to you later. Yeah, so that's what's happening at the moment. That refugee crisis is going to come, and maybe actually, I don't know, we'll see. But it's a mess. So I'm not going to waste more of your time because that's basically all I have.